Okay, so today I'm going to be doing something a little bit special. So, one of my goals for 2021 was to get through the first 5 Animorphs books. And as of August, I have now gotten through those first 5. So today we are going to take, well, for me, I'm going to take a look down memory lane, re-looking over all 5 books and discussing them with you guys as far as the books on their own and drawing them together and discussing how I've gone with them as a series as a whole and my thoughts for what's to come, all of that good stuff. Now, if you have not read these books before and you don't want to be spoiled, please do be mindful there will be spoilers in this video because I can't very well go into detailed in-depth discussions without spoilers. But the good news is if you haven't read these books, by the end of this video you'll be completely up to date with the first 5 books and you can jump right over to book number 6. Let's get right into discussing these books as a whole, starting off with book number 1. So, book number 1 is called The Invasion, and this is where we are introduced to everything. I am now going to do the most unprofessional thing that a booktuber can do, well, not the most, but one of them, by looking down and reading off a piece of paper, because quite frankly, I have written out descriptions of premises of each of these books because I don't want to forget anything that is crucial. So do forgive me as I look down at the piece of paper and read the premise of this book, book number 1, in the Animorphs series. First of all, what you need to know about this series is that there are 5 main characters. We have Jake, who is the official leader, Rachel, who is Jake's cousin, Tobias, who is someone that Jake was tutoring, Cassie, who is Rachel's best friend, and Marco, who is Jake's best friend. These children are in elementary if you're American, or primary if you're an Australian school. While taking a shortcut through an abandoned construction site, the 5 children spot an alien spacecraft. They meet an alien, known as an Andalite, by the name of Prince L. Fangor, who tells the children that Earth is being invaded by a race of aliens called the Yeerks, a slug-like parasitic species who infest humans through their ear canals, taking full control of their human bodies. That turns them into what is called a controller. To combat the Yeerks, Prince Elfangor gives the children a morphing ability, the power to become any creature they touch by absorbing the creature's DNA. Elfangor warns them to never stay beyond 2 hours in a morph, or they will be trapped in that form forever. The Yeerks, who are led by Vissa III, kill Elfangor while the children are in hiding. Now it is the Animorphs' responsibility to combat the Yeerks and save the human race. So the children go on to find out that Jake's older brother Tom is a controller and they plan to rescue him. Jake morphs into a tiger, Rachel morphs into an elephant, Tobias morphs into a red-tailed hawk, Cassie morphs into a horse, and Marco morphs into a gorilla. They are unsuccessful in rescuing Tom, but they do manage to get away safely. However, and this is the biggest however of book number 1, Tobias ends up staying in his red-tailed hawk morph for over the 2-hour limit, which means he is now stuck in red-tailed hawk morph forever. I just quickly want to make the point that every book follows a different Animorphs perspective. Book number 1 opens up with Jake, who ends up eventually being looked upon as the unofficial leader, which is why I think K.A. Applegate started with his perspective. Book number 1 is basically just your ground-laying stuff. We're introduced to the morphing ability, we get to learn how they can acquire the DNA from the animals by touching them, we get to experience with them morphing for the first time, basically playing around with that morphing ability to begin with, and then using it in serious battle mode when they need to as well. And book number 1, as short as it is, still has time to have a battle by the end of the book. So I really enjoyed the book overall, and it had me very much eagerly anticipating book number 2. So let's move on to book number 2, shall we? Which is this book, The Visitor by K.A. Applegate. This book is a little bit worn and torn, and that's because this is the book that I originally read when I was a child in primary, or if you're American, / elementary school. So it's gone through some tough times. The only leads the Animorphs have on the Yeerks, aside from them being jerks, is that their Vice Principal Chapman is a controller. In order to try and learn more about what is going on, Rachel acquires the DNA of Chapman's cat, and while the remaining Animorphs hold on to the cat, Rachel slips into Chapman's house in cat form to look around. She discovers that Chapman is in direct contact with Visser 3. Visser 3 suspects Rachel of being an Andalite, and when Rachel visits Chapman's house a second time, and Visser 3 notices her again, he becomes convinced and orders Chapman to bring her to him. The Animorphs just manage to rescue her. So this perspective, this second book is of the perspective of Rachel. With that, we learn that Rachel is a gymnast and that she loves being a cat, as being a gymnast, you know, you have to go through a lot of training, there's a lot to learn, and you have to be very flexible and nimble, and being a cat, you always land on your feet. So she really enjoys being in this morph, and I think if anything, the struggle for her in that morph, because there always seems to be some sort of a struggle, was more just remembering that she actually is a human and she has a job to do while in that morph because she enjoys it quite a lot. So this book was pretty good. I think it was just more expanding on getting to know the Yeerks, especially Visser 3. I thought all in all it was good. Not as good as book 1, but still good enough to keep me wanting to go with the series. Which now means I move on to discussing book number 3. Oh my goodness, I have a soft spot in my heart for this book, and I have a soft spot in my heart for the Animorph whose perspective we follow in this book. So book number 3 is called The Encounter. So we switch from, in this book, a plot-driven books for the first 2 to character-driven with book number 3. As we follow the perspective of Tobias, the Animorph stuck in hawk form from book number 1. At the beginning of the book, Tobias notices a real hawk trapped and tells his friends. They rescue it. Every time Tobias sees her, he feels that he should be with her instead of his friends. The Animorphs that can morph into fish, but not a lot of time is spent on what the Animorphs themselves are doing. Most of the time is spent on what Tobias is doing, which, because he cannot morph out of his red tail hawk form, be it back to human or into any other animal, he can't always go and do things with the other animals, and because they're morphing into fish and a hawk can't survive underwater, he, is kind of left to stand on guard above the water. So we don't know a lot about what's going on with them while they're going through what they're going through. It is mostly focused on Tobias, which is very much why it's a character-driven story as opposed to a plot-driven one. Tobias kills a rat through pure hawked instinct and becomes disgusted with himself for doing so. So we end up dealing with a very dark, very quickly depressed Tobias. So he flies to a gymnastics exhibition that Rachel is doing and attempts to kill himself. Again, I pause to say here, this is apparently a middle grade series. He is unsuccessful, but abandons his friends for days, regressing into pure hawk instincts. He ends up saving a human from the Yeerks, and the emotion that he feels towards it brings him back to his human instincts, but this takes a long time. Again, it's a character-driven book. We are focusing a lot on Tobias's progress, especially when he is forced to go back, to digress and regress back into his hawk instincts. The Yeerks end up killing the female hawk, which was also very hard to read. Again, is it middle grade? And Tobias becomes distressed over her death. But he also realizes that these emotions are what makes him human, as in hawk instinct mode, he wouldn't have cared that the female hawk had died because it's just another animal and they just died. And he discusses this with Rachel, now beginning to accept his newfound balance between hawk and human instincts. So again, the perspective of that book is from Tobias because it is character driven. We learn about Tobias's struggles with being a hawk full time. So I have a soft spot in my heart for Tobias. That book was just, oh my goodness, it just tugged at all the heartstrings with Tobias's character arc, going through the impossible situation. He can't get out of this morph. He was a child, and now he has to live with the fact that he is a hawk and everything that goes with that. So, let's keep moving because we've taken a long time to get to this point. Moving on to book number 4. This book, which is The Message. In this one we follow Cassie, who has a strange dream at the beginning of the book that there is a sentient presence in the ocean. Jake, meanwhile, has seen a news article about washed up debris on the beach that looks like a ship with Andalite writing. Both Tobias and Cassie have visions about the sea, and everyone decides to morph into dolphins to investigate. They go from trouts, which is really scary for them. They start off being trouts, and it's this whole thought that just keeps going through their mind. We don't want to be lunch. We don't want to be lunch. We don't want to be caught. We don't want to be lunch. Like, it's really, paranoia runs rampant being in trout morph mode. To dolphins, which is a lot of fun for them, to the point that they actually forget that they're on a mission, and Tobias eventually has to talk to them. I didn't mention this. When the Animorphs are in animal form, they still can communicate with each other through something that K.A. Applegate has penned as thought speech. This is where you think what it is you want to say and direct it to who you want to say it to. So while Tobias is on guard, because again he can't go into the water, for them, he's directing through thought speech to them. Guys, you have a mission and you got less than 2 hours. We gotta move. They eventually meet their second ever Andalite. Forgive me, Axamil Esgareth Isthel, who they end up referring to as Axe for short. Axe reveals that he is actually Prince Alfangor's brother. They save Axe and take him back home with them, Axe vowing to assist the Animorphs, and looks to Jake as their leader, referring to him as Prince Jake. Axe will end up staying on Cassie's farm. So again, the perspective here was Cassie, and we learn more about her love of animals, and her work involving healing animals on her parents' farm. This was a pretty big book, and again, because we go back to it being plot-driven after the character-driven book in book 3, Book 4 really does drive not only the story, but the series forwards, especially because we do meet Axe, and because Axe is vowing to help the animals. So now the animals have an Andalite on their side. So this makes book number 5, and the way it opens up, really interesting, because what ended up happening in book number 5 at the beginning, which is the Predator, by the way, is not something that I expected. We now follow Marco, the only Animorph yet to have a perspective, so therefore this book will end the first round of perspectives, and then I assume in book 6 we go back to Jake. We learn that Marco has lived a tough life. His mother died in a boating accident, and his father has fallen into a deep depression since. Again, it's a middle grade. Axe wants to go home. Yes, already. He needs a ship to get there, but unfortunately one of the ship's components can only be found once again in Vice Chapman's home. The new morph in this book is ants, as they morph in them to get into Chapman's home, and they nearly die in that form by another ant colony. This was really well done. Yes, we got to see in book number 4 how their trout instincts had them being very paranoid, but their ant instincts were even more filled with paranoia. And the second time that they morph into ants, because they do it twice, they are actually attacked by an ant colony that nearly end up killing them. So it was a really, really big moment there. The next day, Marco tells his friends that he is out. He will do one more thing with them, but then he is done and he will no longer be an Animorph. Jake understands. He says, look, you've done more than you needed to. You're fine. That's okay. If you're out, I understand. The Animorphs are eventually captured in their animal forms from book 1. So again, Jake being a tiger, Rachel being an elephant, Tobias being a red-tailed hawk, Cassie being a horse, and Marco being a gorilla. And they learn that they are to meet Visser 1. If Visser 3 seems like an imposing villain, Visser 1 is the highest ranked of all the villains. When they meet Visser 1, however, it is to Marco's shock horror as he realizes that Visser 1 is actually his mother. Yeah, again, it's a middle grade book, but my word. She naturally doesn't know Marco is there as he's in his gorilla morph. Now, Vista 1, not knowing that they're there, but wanting to make Vista 3 look bad because there's political issues between Vista 1 and Vista 3, assists the Animorphs to escape, and they end up getting out safely and unmorph just in time. They get very close to that 2-hour mark. Marco then vows that he will continue being an Animorph as he now has something worth fighting for because of Vista 1 being his mother. So we got the perspective of Marco, and from my end it was great to see what was going on with him when he was not with the others. But overall, I absolutely do love this series. I'm trying to make sure it's in order. I do absolutely love this series, and I can't wait to continue on with it. I'm not fanning this out well at all. I can't wait to continue on with it in 2022. I don't know how many I'm going to have the goal to read, but again, if you would like to talk with me about these first 5 books that I've discussed with you in this video today, please feel free to comment in the space below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it. Thank you so much for watching this video and letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah. Good night and happy reading!